Okay, so for today's lesson, I'm going to show you how to change your sloper into a drop waist. So I've traced around my basic sloper. As you can see here, I've got my dart drawn in. I've drawn my high hip and my low hip. I don't necessarily need these lines, but I just like to kind of keep them in here for some reference. So I'm going to, this is my normal waistline up here. Remember, we have no seam allowances on this or grain lines at the moment on this at all. So this would be my natural waistline. So I want to drop this skirt. I want to have it sit about 2.5 inches below my natural waistline. So in order to do that, I have to take, and I'm going to take my ruler here. So I've got my 2.5 inch mark lined up, and I'm just going to follow along from the top at about 2.5 inches. I'm going to leave where the dart is for the moment. I'm just going to come over here. So I'm staying on 2.5 inches. I'm using a little bit thinner marker while I do this, just so that my line is a little more accurate. So now I've got my line here. I can go in from each of these legs of my dart and just put just a little mark there, and at 2.5 just a little mark there. Now the problem with some of this is because this is a dart, because it's creating some design, it does tend to go up. So I don't want that to happen when I draw this line out. So I'm going to take my curved ruler and I'm going to start at the front. So from the center front, you want to go out about 3/4 of an inch, staying nice and square with your center front line. Let's put center front here. So I want this to be a nice right angle. Now I'm going to take my curve and I'm just going to carefully go out here. Now you see when I come to the dart, there's a few of my lines that are a little bit higher, but once this is all put together, that's going to just work out fine. So I'm just giving this. So there's my new line that's coming in from the center front. So I've now dropped this down by 2.5 inches. Okay, so this up here, we're going to cut that off. We're not going to use that. So this is our new top seam stitching line. So I have a bit of a dart left in here. We're not going to sew this dart in. There's not really enough there. You can, but really it's just going to cause more problems. Best thing to do with this is to take your ruler and measure out how much you've actually got here. So on this line here, I've got 1/2 inch. Down at my high hip line, I've got 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to kind of mark what I need there and then what I need up here. So now I have, if you can see, let me take, you see there's the marks there. So now I'm just going to take, and I just want to draw this new curve using a fatter marker now. So I want to make sure that I don't get on the wrong side of my line. Okay, so you see there's my new side seam. So now this dart, we're just going to ignore it because we've taken this area here, this triangle here is actually coming out of the side seam. Okay, so now when we go to do the back of our skirt, we're going to have to make sure that our lines, our side seams match up, and that we're taking out roughly about the same amount in the back. So now I have my dropped waist. Now I'm ready to take and draw my seam allowances on it. I can take my 5/8 of an inch. I can take this marker here, actually. This is actually a 1/2 inch marker, but it's got a nice solid line if you just find the line. So now I can draw all my seam allowances in. all the way around and decide if I'm cutting this on the center front. Okay, so this is my front of my skirt. Okay, so I've now got this. Now, I could decide to put a contoured waistband on this. So if I'm going to take this and put a contoured waistband on it, I still want it to have the drop waist, but I could either put a facing, which is going to be on the inside of my skirt, so you won't see it, or I can make a contoured waistband. Okay, so now I'm going to take my back and I'm going to draw my back of my skirt here. So I'm just tracing this out. Tracing going into all my notches, where my high hip, where my low hip is, double notch at the back so that you recognize that it's a back seam. Okay. Oh, so there's my dart there. So now I'm going to join up the legs of my dart. I'm going to draw my high hip in, even though we don't necessarily need to have it in here. So where I have my double notches in my back, the bottom one lines up with the side, and then I put the second notch right above it. Okay, so same thing with this. I'm going to drop this by 2.5 inches. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make sure I'm square on the center back. So I'm just going to go along here. Just make sure that your line that you're drawing your little slot on or slit on is the top is at the 1/2 inch as well. I'm going to avoid the dart for the moment. All the way across. Okay, so now I'm going to take my curved ruler, and the first 3/4 to an inch, I want to make sure I've got it straight. Now I'm just going to curve my lines up here. I've got a few areas where I'm actually keeping my curve straighter, so you can see I'm actually about a 1/16 off in a couple of spots here, but I'd rather not have that dip up at the top. So now I've got my contour or my dropped waist. So my new waistline is now 2.5 inches below. And the same as in the front. In the front we had more than what you want to just ignore for a dart. So I'm going to take and just measure this off. So I'm actually coming out on my high hip, I'm coming out at 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to mark over here 3/4 of an inch. Actually not on my high hip, that's on the top of my seam. On my high hip I'm coming out at 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to mark out there. Now I want to make sure that these two lines that this curve matches up with the curve in my front. I don't want to have one a little more curved than the other. So what I'm going to do now that I've got this done up here, I'm actually going to bring my pattern over and line up. I can see through this paper, so I'm actually able to match up, make sure that my lines match up, which they do. And you can, after you've got this your skirt cut out, you can actually take and true this line a little bit better with the front. You can line the two up so that your front and your back match, because this area here, because there's a bit of an angle to it, it will have a little bit of bias when you're sewing. So you can see how this part of my dart, I've taken it out here on the side seam, and as on the other half of this, it will come out of this other side of the back. Okay, so this is my back, and so now I have a dropped waist.